Hi there, this is Marielle Concepcion, your host of the My DPC Story podcast. Have you or someone you care about ever been burned by the U.S. healthcare system? If so, you are listening to the right video, because if you are listening, chances are the answer is yes. But the U.S. spends so much on healthcare. Why are so many Americans affected personally and especially financially by the healthcare system? Shouldn't that mean we have better healthcare access and treatment options? Shouldn't it be easy for us to be able to see our doctor when we need to instead of turning to the ER or urgent care? Historically, it's been seemingly impossible to answer these questions. But now that is changing through the direct primary care movement. This video that you have tuned into will bring you into the world of direct primary care and show you how physicians all over the country are changing the way they practice so patients from all backgrounds get the high quality care they need and deserve, which makes for both happy patients and physicians. Learn even more by subscribing to the My DPC Story YouTube channel. Find us on all major podcast platforms. Find us on socials at My DPC Story and at mydpcstory.com. There you can find resources including how to find a DPC doctor near you, conferences about DPC, DPC startup guides and advice, a store with DPC swag, and even a mapper showing where podcast guests are practicing. Thanks for tuning in to hear about this powerful movement. Now, on to the episode. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
Direct primary care was my exodus from the traditional healthcare system and has, in 7 years' time, has provided me with autonomy, education, camaraderie, enthusiasm, opportunity, and hope. And I became a physician because I had a very clear idea of what it meant to me to be a physician. And as I spent 5 or more years in the system, I started to see that I was dedicating my life to something I no longer believed in. So the transition and discovery of direct primary care has allowed me to authentically be the physician I want to be. It has restored the joy that I think is inherent to this profession. And honestly, it sounds silly to say this, but at the end of my days, I think it has allowed me to be really proud of the life I've created. Not to mention the daily challenges of entrepreneurship. And I said when I went to med school that I wanted to be challenged every day. And I don't know if I really meant that, but certainly DPC and entrepreneurship and the practice of medicine has really delivered on that. This is Dr. Julie Gunther. I am the owner of SparkMD in Boise, Idaho, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Julie Gunther earned her medical degree from the University of Washington School of Medicine in Seattle and completed her residency at Dahl Memorial Hospital Family Medicine Residency. She is a dual board-certified family physician and American Academy of Family Physicians Fellow who founded SparkMD, a direct primary care practice in downtown Boise, Idaho in 2014. In her 7 years in DPC, she has been featured in Forbes, National Public Radio, Bloomberg, Reason TV, Medical Economics, and several other news outlets. She is a DPC leader, current president of the DPC Alliance, and has spoken at the DPC Summit, Doctors for Patient Care Foundation, FMX, and many local and regional meetings since 2016. She is a founding member of the DPC Alliance, a former board member of the Direct Primary Care Coalition, and one of the minds behind the DPC Alliance Mastermind series. Dr. Gunther loves challenges, entrepreneurship, working with people, and values that all DPC has done for her professional development, love of medicine, community, and healthcare as a whole. Good morning, Julie.
Oh my gosh, how are you? You're due soon, yes?
Yeah, we are 37 and 1 today. It's unreal because, I mean, like yourself, you have 2. And yeah, I have no idea what I'll remember from
the first one, and my son is almost 3. He's actually going to be 3 on Monday. So we'll see. And then now it's different because with COVID, masking in the hospital during labor, I'm like, that'll be different.
Like you just don't need more drama during labor. But in my very strong opinion, I fully respect people who choose not to have children. I fully respect people who only want 1 kid. But we only have 2. I would have liked to have had 4, but that probably wouldn't have been a great life situation as things have panned out. But I firmly believe having a second kiddo made us way better parents for the first kiddo. That's awesome. Yeah, and to a certain extent. And then my brother, so I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old now, and my brother and his wife just had babies. They're actually 1 this weekend. They had twins. It's funny to see because while it's been 12 years since we had a newborn, we do newborn care at the practice too, but I'm just so much more comfortable with them than I was with my own babies. And my brother is, I think, sometimes a little bit floored. He's like, how do you know all this? How do you know to do all this? But you just learn it.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So it's weird to say, but our experience, it's actually easier with 2. Because it's easier but harder, if that makes sense. But the first one just has to learn to get their stuff together. It's a perfect age in the sense that there's probably things your 3-year-old should be pushed to start doing for himself that you're not doing because you're first-time parents with him. And so there's some natural rhythm to it, I think.
I love to hear that, especially from a mom of 2 who are 3 years apart too. It's so different when you're taking care of kids in the clinic. And then when it's your own, you're like, what do I do sometimes? Rob Rossborough, he was saying the other day, it's okay. The second one will be feral. And that I can picture that. But at the same time, I think that my son is very much a helper. He's definitely in the I do it stage. So I think it'll be nice to have him help out so that he feels included. And I think that's one of the things I'm the most apprehensive about is how he doesn't feel that he's any less important. Yeah.
But he will be. And it sounds crazy, but that's the fun thing of parenting is it's a gift, in my opinion, for a person to be raised to understand that at times their needs have to be prioritized with other people's needs. Yeah. And having a second child forces you to help him with that lesson if you weren't going to do it anyway. And then in hindsight, that's a really valuable lesson for him. And the other thing we talk about all the time in our house is just, I believe in an infinite capacity for love or giving. So it's like when you and your partner married, there was no discussion that, well, maybe some people do. Gosh, if we have a child, is that going to dilute our ability to care for each other? None. Now, I don't know what it would be like to have 21 kids. I think there is a bandwidth of ability to attend to anything. But I think love can be administered in very small increments. And it can be very clear that it's true love in the sense of I'm a big proponent as a working parent that I'm a better, more loving, more capable parent when I'm able to be with my kids a small amount of time than I'm with them a lot. And that's illustrated when we had with COVID. There's a point where you're like, I actually just want you to go away. My husband and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
We spent
congratulations to you too.
We spent 5 days together in Jackson Hole and in the car. Yeah. And I love this man and I miss spending a lot of high quality time with him. But there's also a point where I'm like, I'm not my best me if I'm with anyone all the time. I just can't. I need some space. But by the last, I want everyone to go away and I want to do a craft.
That's awesome.
Well, I am so grateful that you are letting me talk to you and participate in this. And I meant what I said online, which is this is something that is necessary, that is valuable. I wish some sensationalistic TV station would catch on and do a long documentary about all of us because all of these individual stories are so important. There's a lot of discussion in our movement about we need to turn the focus on the patient and the discussion should be on the patient. And actually, I've always disagreed. And it's one of those things that is hard to disagree with because clearly the calling of medical care is about taking care of others. But it's a completely perfect analogy to this. If there is no mechanism in place for you to take care of yourself, and in fact, your husband and your 2 children do nothing but just demand of you, and then on top of it, you have to answer to a landlord and the garbage man and the window cleaner. If every domain in our personal life was beyond our control, yet we were expected to answer to it, but then we're expecting your children to thrive, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's not to say there's not a give and take. It's not to say someone has disproportionately bad or difficult days. But
while we talk about burnout and exhaustion, it's been very hard for us as a culture to really talk about the privileged physician, and we look at physicians as being of great privilege, but talking about how absolutely essential it is for the physician to thrive. And from that comes a thriving patient population.
It's a very weird way that I got introduced to that concept, but it's so absolutely true. We have a Filipino veteran focused clinic in Sacramento. I went to UC Davis, and we were doing a volunteer clinic for them through UC Davis. And at this golf tournament, there was a person who was one of the players, took a golf cart and it flipped over the hill. Yes, baby. You okay?
What's your little man's name?
Oh, can you tell Dr. Julie what your name is?
My name is Asher.
Hi, Asher. My name is Julie. How are you, Asher?
Asher, how are you doing?
Good.
You good? Are you helping mommy?
Yeah.
Does mommy have a baby in her tummy?
Yeah. That's baby brother.
Your baby brother? Are you so excited?
Stay with us. We'll be right back. My DPC Story just hit 100,000 downloads on Apple Podcasts alone, and we could not have done it without our amazing listeners. So to thank you and to celebrate this milestone, we're giving away an incredible DPC Summit Prize package for the DPC Summit happening in Minneapolis this summer. The prize includes My DPC Story swag, and on top of that, the prize also includes a ticket to the DPC Summit. Check out my interview with Dr. Jeff Davenport, where you'll hear more details about the summit. To be eligible for this giveaway, all you have to do is first rate and review My DPC Story on your podcast listening platform. Pro tip, if you rate My DPC Story with a 5-star review, it helps the visibility of the podcast and it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Number 2, take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@mydpcstory.com. You'll find that email in the show notes as well. And third, make sure you're following My DPC Story on all your social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. All the social links are at the bottom of mydpcstory.com and also in our show notes. For bonus points, share both this episode and the My DPC Story posts about the DPC Summit with your community. The winner will be announced in a future episode, so make sure you tune in to find out if you'll be heading to the summit. If you've already purchased your ticket and you're the winner, My DPC Story will send you a check for the price of your ticket. Thank you for listening to My DPC Story, and best of luck.
But yeah, this golf cart fell off of a side of a hill. And I was freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, this person is hurt. What do I do? And this is when I was in undergrad. So I hadn't had any medical training. And this doctor, he talked to me afterwards. He's like, you have to take care of yourself before you are able to take care of others. Because if you are freaking out, you cannot focus on what needs to get done. And so it's a very different way. Is Spot coming? Hold on to Mama's hand. But yeah, the idea that with this podcast, I love the idea that it can be timeless, in that someone 2 years from now who's new to DPC, or someone who's been in it for 7 years, is listening to somebody else's voice and reminding themselves about how like their own journey was, or how DPC can inspire people, and how it is important to take care of oneself, because you eat when you can, you pee when you can mentality it's not okay. And your patients can totally feel that, right? You have patients who, they know you well, and then they'll comment, are you okay today? They check in with you because they can tell that you're stressed if you're running behind and stuff. So I cannot agree with you more on that, for sure. Julie, I actually had read before your book, you had put out that
document, that Gmail. Yeah. And that's basically what the book is. I added a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But with the Holstein Manifesto and with your comments, the things that you added in your book, though, that really just floored me. The first day I was reading it, you talk about how, let me turn to the page. One of the things that you mentioned was your years in service. And then all of a sudden they're basically saying, as your employer, like, you don't matter. If you stay, you stay. If you don't, we don't really care. And literally 3 days before I created this podcast, my husband and I had been given you either sign an RVU contract or you get terminated letter. That's a similar situation of devaluing your services as a doctor. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is uncanny, and then your note about, your patients and you offered them a same day visit. And then you didn't know that your staff told them the closest visit she has is 2 weeks from now. And you're like, if you had control over that, you would never have let that happen. And you don't even know that happens sometimes. I really related to those. But so when similar situations happened to me just as of September, I literally sat there and I was like, this is extra time on my plate because I spend 4 to 6 hours probably a week doing the podcasting and editing. But yeah, I never thought that I would ever do a podcast or ever find healing in a podcast, but it's totally because I'm hearing other people's stories.
Yeah, one of my biggest epiphanies, I think I tried to say this in the document or the book, and what I've loved about DPC, at the beginning it felt like I was really putting myself out there and exposing these things that I felt vulnerable about. And then you sit in a room and everyone's nodding, and all of a sudden you've found your people. And then people come up and they're crying because they felt alone too. And what you said and those specific examples, all of a sudden, just like you are like, kapow. And what's tragic is that this isn't a unique story, but what's so important is, and this is changing, which is good, but physicians really die in isolation, and we're really ripe in the employed model to be one-offed, meaning like you're the problem, you're the trouble child, you're the one who can't get your note done on time. And all of a sudden, what I think of a lot is I haven't had a lot of bad relationships in my life, but I had 1 or 2 romantic relationships that I didn't realize how not good they were until I was out of them, because I didn't work in them. And I think many of us have that personal analogy. And so it's so hard to know how bad something is when you're in it, especially with all these other social things we're taught about. Don't whine, don't cry, don't pee. What are you complaining about? You're making $150K a year. What's your problem? So my big epiphany was realizing, like, I was so mad at my employer. And my big epiphany that I think is actually even more tragic was when I realized, oh my God, it's not my employer. This is the entirety of what's happening in our healthcare system. So for my little like examples of unsustainability touch points, like someone who's very close to me with strep throat who just wanted to pop in and get his throat swabbed, and he's directed to an urgent care, and I'm RVU paid, and I'm like, the whole thing's insanity. And it just shows how the system's broken. When I share those stories, and then 20, 15, 100, whatever, or even one doctor is, oh my God, that just happened today. We get to see that it's a failure of the structure of our healthcare system and the physician's role in it. I wish it was just me. I wish I was just some profound problem child and that everyone else's situation was great, because then it would mean our healthcare system as a whole was more highly functional than it is. But without ego, without paternalism, we have to get to a place, in my opinion, where we respect that the physician is like a quarterback or the point guard or whatever we want to call it. And that, we're all on the same team. There are people who carry heavier weight and have bigger roles and are more accountable. And what comes with that is the ability to have more authority. And that just is what is necessary to provide the highest quality and the safest patient care. And the systems I worked in were not in a phase where they accepted that. My voice didn't matter. My opinion didn't matter. They said it did, but over time it didn't. And it was to the detriment of my health and my patient's health. And it took me a super long time to catch on to that, because I thought something was wrong with me.
And as sad as that is, it's not surprising though, because of the way that even our training is. Like, most of us have had experiences where the attendings, no matter what specialty they were, have been very patriarchal. And I think that the idea of opening your own clinic after residency is so foreign to people. And like in my so I graduated 2015, and in my residency, there were 12 per year, and 90% of them went to Kaiser, because that's what you do. You go to residency and then you go to Kaiser. And I was also in that boat. Like, I wanted rural family full scope medicine, but what I envisioned was an employed model. And we know that CMS is going to make whatever changes they're going to make. But like, even in our local community, the specialists are the ones, ironically, just speaking up when you can't code until you fill out this screen, or you can't pass go until you do this now. And it's so painful. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask, especially of you, because with your involvement in the DPC Alliance and the movement in general, like, how do we affect the pipeline? How do we get people at an early age to think about the possibility of being the quarterback, or the possibility of being empowered to run your own clinic? That's a huge question that I keep thinking over and over in my head. We can't get more people in the movement fast enough. And one of the things that I was thinking about too is that a lot of DPCs are growing. And at some point, if like yourself, if you decide to open a second or third or fourth branch of SparkMD, who are you going to hire to do that? Like, where's the pipeline coming in to feed new DPC doctors?
I think this is a really great question. I think it's a.
Can we see her?
You can't see me.
Yes, I will show you. I will show you her picture here. This.
I have very crazy black and white hair.
Did you just say FaceTime?
You did. He's awesome.
You're a kid of. That's Dr. Julie.
That's me. Do I have my crazy black and white hair, or do I have long brown hair in that picture?
This one is the former with the black glasses and your black shirt and stethoscope.
Okay. So that's where I have my black and white hair.
Yeah.
I used to have very long brown hair, but that's changed. I think the pipeline issue, it goes hand in hand with the scalability issue. And I don't know, my like heart, my gut sinks when this issue comes up. And I think it's because I know it's one of the hardest questions about where we're headed. And I've long felt like, I've long questioned. So I'm the president of the Direct Primary Care Alliance for the listeners. And the Direct Primary Care Alliance is physician-founded, physician-directed, physician members. And it's all about advocacy, mentorship, and education around direct primary care. And a large majority of the physician members in the Direct Primary Care Alliance own their own, what people would call micro practice. So many of us have one, maybe two clinics, and follow a model of X number of patients, 500, 600 patients, 800 patients, 400 patients, whatever, and a doctor. And there's been some contention in the DPC movement that what is true, quote unquote, DPC. And I think I personally think the healthcare system is so fundamentally broken that there's massive amounts of room for all kinds of innovation in this space. And they all drive down cost, improve transparency, improve patient care, improve the quality of the life of the provider or the physician. So I don't necessarily ascribe to one specific way to do this, but I own my own micro practice, so to speak. And the fundamental challenge really is, I think all of our pricing is a tiny bit too low to create a readily scalable solution within the micro practice environment. And so there's a bunch of conversations we have to have in this movement, because I think there's a couple things going on. One is our residents, our doctors in training exposed to this version of primary care. And there are doctors out there who are young and who are just like we were when we were young, that the calling to primary care is the promise of long-term relationships and being embedded in a community and all these intangible things that really do make this job amazing. And those things are really stripped away in the, I would say, the employed model or the system model. You just don't get to see that. So I'm concerned the people who might have a native calling to some of the intangible benefits of primary care, if they aren't exposed to DPC, like boots on the ground DPC, that calling and that interest is not going to be reinforced. We also layer in what we all know, which is we still have this problem of catastrophic debt for most people when they graduate medical school residency, which is a barrier to primary care, period, for everybody. That debt level with no guaranteed income is a huge barrier to getting a loan and entrepreneurship and startup. And so there's a lot of barriers or perceived barriers. But at the end of the day, I think most of us would say, and I do believe there's people out there who know, but still maybe need to have their own life lesson, that it doesn't matter if you earn $150,000, $250,000, $300,000 a year. There's a point where your life can be made so miserable that there's no amount of financial security that makes a job worth it. So in terms of the pipeline question, I think the place we're at right now is I do think people with a big heart for family medicine and some exposure or awareness to DPC are much more likely to spend their first 3 to 5 years employed because of the financial risk and because of the promise that systems make. But I do think we're just going to continue to see people at that 3 to 5 year mark start to say, oh, heck no, I can do this so much better on my own. It would be much more ideal to actually have physicians come up from high school, college, medical school, and go straight into a cost transparent model. And if we could do that in a way where those physicians didn't have the debt burden, that would be transformative. So one thing I've worked on behind the scenes here and there with one of the groups I do some lobbying with, and it's more of a discussion than anything that's been actionable, but I've also applied twice to try to get SparkMD designated as basically a health core service site. And what would be super transformative in this movement is if there was a cost threshold or a price threshold under which clinics like the clinic you're going to start, or clinics like the clinic I have, basically clinics that are driving down the cost of healthcare, that are charging less than $1,000 a year for healthcare, if we could readily qualify for debt reduction, which I think is not only appropriate, but mutually beneficial. And that might be something that then fills the pipeline. If you go into the military, or you go work in the prisons or the National Health Service Corps, or whatever, I think this innovative model of healthcare, I think we could put some parameters up and continue to push for DPC types to qualify. And that would help with recruiting. A lot of physicians too, and a lot of our colleagues that are burnt out, that don't want to take on the full responsibilities of entrepreneurship, they want guaranteed salary. And that's tricky. I need you to join me. I want you to take less income. I want you to take on some risk, but you're not going to be the owner. That's a really difficult proposition. So we have a lot of hurdles. But I do fundamentally think that the more of us that just keep doing this, and the more patients get exposed to this as an opportunity, the more patients get educated that a CBC is not $48 or $110. It can be $3 or $5. We get this groundswell that creates demand. And then we're just going to continue to have this supply demand discussion for a long time.
There's two things that popped into my head when you said that. One, my last day before maternity leave, my last patient, I spent 42 minutes discussing insurance and what is covered and what is not, and didn't even talk about medicine.
Yeah.
But it is draining emotionally when you have more of those patient visits than you do taking care of people, because people are so not aware of the fact that medicine is not, especially primary care, is not that expensive. And the other thing is that in terms of getting the word out about DPC, one of the strategies that I saw, one of my friends who just opened up a DPC in Michigan, Lakeshore MD, Dr. Mara, she just made her website live yesterday. And so she had learned about this from another DPC doctor in Michigan, but they listed the mapper on as part of their website with notes about, if your family is interested in this type of care, but they don't live in Michigan, check out this mapper and find someone. So I think even by doing little things, anything we can do to spread the word is definitely helpful.
And what's been strange to me, and this is where I honestly think your podcast has an incredible opportunity. What's been really strange to me is, with everything going on in our country right now, I feel like we see so much recycled news, so many riffs on the same stories, or a little tweaking this bit of data or that bit of data. And healthcare is an incredibly hot topic right now for innumerable reasons. So what has been strange to me, some of our DPC colleagues have made it to the big stage. Dr. Josh Umber and Ryan Neuhoffel have been on Hannity a number of times. I did a short bit on NPR talking about what the pros and cons of Medicare for all kind of a situation. But what's crazy to me, and what I hear from a lot of my patients, is they're like, how have you been in this community 7 years and we don't even know about you? And sometimes I feel like that's such a marketing failure on my part, or is it a marketing failure on the part of the Alliance? But there's absolute clear data, clear experience that the best way to grow your micro practice, your macro practice, or to grow this movement is just word of mouth. So there's so much more out there than there was before. But I'm not sure why we don't have this massive, CNN expose or MSNBC story, or why does the whole world not know about that this is happening? And I don't have an answer for that, but I think this is a story that needs told. Yeah, I say all the time, and I don't know if this feels like it's been my quote, but I'm sure it's not. Nothing sells like authenticity. And when people are starting their DPC adventure and they're worried about, how do I explain this business model to patients, or how do I deal with people suggesting that I'm abandoning them or whatever, I'm like, just be your authentic self and give your earnest and professional and brief explanation for why you have to do this. And I was thinking about some things, and I don't know why I was thinking about this, but I was thinking about, if you basically calculate the standard hourly wage for a family physician, last year, the average family physician in the U.S. reportedly made about $208,000 a year. And if you work 40 hours a week, that's $108 an hour, which most of us don't, right? Most of us work 60 to 80 hours a week. So that gets you closer to $54 an hour, which is actually lower than the standard hourly wage for most NPs or PAs, not to mention plumbers and many other professionals, right? The gentleman that helped redo my front yard, because it was a shit show, excuse my language, just charged $60 an hour for labor. So when you said you spent 42 minutes on talking about insurance, you have someone with up to 35 years of education, $400,000 of debt, who's being paid at best $100 an hour So you just spent 3/4 of an hour. Someone just paid you $80 to talk about insurance in a scenario in which your training is actually to advance a person's health. So like the absolute, you and I and doctors, we may say we're not doing well, we're not thriving, there's more physician suicide, we're frustrated, but I like to always try to break this down to the most objective information we can. And what's absolutely insane about primary care is we actually, and I don't mean this as a smart aleck, but we actually have a job to do. Like being a doctor is a job. And what I heard over and over and over again was, oh, well, when we need to order the mammograms this way now, the doctors can click on that. We need to get a prior authorization. The doctors can help with that. We need to do more end of life discussions. Well, that's the doctor's responsibility. And I just found like we were like this endless, expansive bucket. But I'm like, but actually the bare bones of what we're supposed to do already actually has totally filled the capacity of the time that I have with this individual. So, not just DPC, but healthcare transformation in general, I think requires physician and physician organizations to come back and start to say, actually, we have a job. Like the job that we do is hard. The job that we do matters. And we have a job. So adding on to that doesn't work. And I told my patients right before I started Spark, I actually started to think months before I said it, but I started to say to some patients, I was like, you need a doctor. Like, you need someone who can actually be a doctor. I have so many other criteria I have to fill to even just survive this 15 or 20 minutes that, like, is there someone out there who can just be a doctor? And so what I love about direct care and our mission is healthcare simplified. But I have to remind everyone that works for me, from the new counselor we have to our esthetician, to my nurse practitioner, to my nurse, anything that detracts from providing care of the patient, we are on constant hypervigilant watch of, is it necessary? And are we going to do it? And the beauty of DPC is you can start to say, no. We had a patient yesterday who's a nice gentleman, but he's fairly affluent and hurt his knee 4 weeks ago, probably meniscal. His buddy's a retired orthopedist. And he called in and said, hey, my buddy's a retired orthopedist. He checked out my knee. He said he thinks it's a meniscus. So I want a referral to this orthopedist and that orthopedist because I want to get in with them. And I want you to do both referrals so I can see who's available first. And I called him and I said, no, we're not sending 2 simultaneous referrals. And we're not doing it on a knee I haven't examined. And I want you to come in. I'll check out your knee and I can inject it if it needs that. And we can order an x-ray if it needs. And anyway, it's just the beauty of DPC, and had he got mad or had he said, I want something else, we have the privilege of saying, gosh, this just isn't a good fit. At the end of the day, the guy was like, oh, I didn't know you could do all this, which is crazy. Another part of the conversation. But I've had a patient that demanded dermatology referral and a prior authorization for rosacea, and she wouldn't do any of the treatments I recommended. And what was so wonderful about DPC is I just said, no. I was like, you can come see me and do what I've prescribed. And then if that fails, I'm happy to send you to derm, but I'm actually not using my time to send a referral when you haven't even done what I've tried. And anyway, so I love being focused on doing my job.
This one, here, if you want to see Olaf, let's watch Frozen because...
No, not Olaf and the Wolves.
Okay, we don't have to watch Olaf and the Wolves. How about we watch Olaf and the Fire Spirit?
No. Not the Fire Spirit and Elsa and Olaf and Christopher and Anna.
What's funny, the difference in 3 months, you'll have this exact same conversation with Asher. And what will happen is you'll say, you can either watch this or you can go hang out with Dad, but that's your only choice right now because I've got to feed brother. And then he'll be like, this is fine. And all of a sudden you'll be like, what? That's fine? You know how many times so I'm sitting here listening and I'm like, dude, Asher, you get that or you get nothing. And he'd be like, what? That's not how this works. And he'll start to learn like, mom, that's my options. That's a good show. I'll watch it 42 times.
I can totally future self see that happening, but yeah, I'm so not good at that right now. I was asking Neil, like, how in the heck do you get your 5 children to eat vegetables? And he literally said something like that. It's either vegetables or you don't eat. And I was like, okay. But yeah, the value that we have to always remind ourselves of. I frequently get that comment, like your patient made to you about your orthopedic services. You do that? Like you're a family doctor, though. I thought I have to see a specialist. That is the mentality that a lot of patients have. My patient population up here is about 50 50-something% Medicare. And it's ironic that those are the people who ask me that question the most, even though in this community, there was a doctor who retired at 94 and who was doing home visits and fee-for-service model, but he was still like local to this community for decades. And they went to him for everything. And
one of the AAFP represents all family physicians, not just DPC physicians. And I work with them and engage with them quite often. And I've thought about this before, and then just this conversation made me think of it again. I think one of the best things family physicians could do is push the AAFP to rerun a massive national campaign about what a family doctor is and what they can do. I'm going to bring that up with them. But just because we need more PR in the sense of we primary care doctors, the more we've like sped up the visit within the system, double booked, sent people elsewhere, referred onward, filled up the subspecialty schedules, the more we've taught people about what we don't do or can't. And I'm just a big believer that the number one ingredient for high quality primary care is time. And then that just educates our patients about what we're capable of. It's also the most efficient thing for the healthcare system, ironically, slowing down primary care, allowing primary care physicians the flexibility to spend a lot of time with people is the thing I think would transform the healthcare system the most. But we have to change our compensation models and our revenue models and our billing models to accommodate that.
When you said that, it's like the idea of more people knowing that we're capable of what we are capable of, or just even the idea of patients asking us, hey, could you do that before they ask for a specialist? It just makes me all super bubbly inside, because I'm like, yes, I can do that. Where my husband and I are, where we chose to do rural medicine. That's what we wanted when we were at Creighton. That's what we wanted when we were in training in Superior, Nebraska, where the only people in this town are family physicians other than the APPs. And they're totally valued by their entire community because there's nobody else. Okay, so I'm gonna try your tactic. So Asher, we got to pick one movie or it's gonna go off. So which one would you like to pick?
This one.
Here are our options: Frozen, Cars, or no movie.
Cars.
Okay, so we're gonna stick with Cars. So remember, Cars or no movie are the options right now. Okay, here we go. Cars or nothing. I'm going to try it. All right. Okay. But yeah, that would be amazing.
There's been quite a bit of criticism of the AAFP, and having worked with now the highest official at the AAFP, Sean Martin, fairly extensively. I have to be just being completely honest. I've been super impressed overall with what they're doing and what they try to do. They're not perfect. They're a massive organization. There's a lot of business decisions that occur that I might not personally agree with, but I do think the AAFP as an organization earnestly wants to represent family medicine well. And the challenge is that DPC as a movement among family medicine, while I think it's where family medicine should go, I would like them to put even more time, money, and energy behind us. We are a microscopic fraction of the broader AAFP membership. So the attention we get, so to speak, the resources we get to have our own conference, it's not enough. I want more. We all want more. But if we, again, try and distill it down to mathematics, as a percentage of the entire membership of the AAFP, DPC physicians remain a minority. And so to that end, we do have quite a voice with them. The other thing I think, and physicians, we have so much to learn, which is good. But we think about like Kubler-Ross's 7 stages of grief or whatever. And no, it's okay.
Sorry, baby. Because I heard that Bethany is like doing double duty now because she helps him out as well as doing the DPC stuff that she was doing before.
Bethany has been an incredible DPC advocate, DPC representative, and I believe she's gradually moved up through the AAFP's organizational ranks. I'm not 100% clear, and I should be, which is funny because she and I interact and talk a lot. I'm not 100% clear on all of her roles, but she's a very meaningful, very influential voice in DPC, and she and Sean have worked together for a long time. And they're both very strong advocates of DPC, although I do respect that Sean represents all family physicians now. So
Sure.
But anyway, so you had the questions you prepared for me were so thoughtful, and I really appreciate that. Like, you did a lot of reading. I wanted to see if there's any specific things you wanted me to touch on, whether it's like entrepreneurship or breast cancer or being a woman in this movement? Or is there anything that stuck out to you that is different about me than some other people you might interview that would be helpful to talk about?
Yeah. I definitely would say, because and I'm grateful that you talked about the Alliance and just the pipeline there, because and I don't know if you have any more to add on that, because I want people to have a clear, just like we do about DPC, like that people understand that we can be full scope care doctors at an affordable price. I want people to have more clarity on what the Alliance is and how it can help them become that doctor, because especially like interacting with people on DPC Doc's Facebook group who are new or thinking about, they're like, what is the Alliance?
And I think that's good.
So that's something.
The best thing about a movement is when it starts to grow beyond itself. And one of the challenges, I think, of social media is there's answers to questions instantaneously, but it doesn't always mean those answers are fully informed. And that may seem a little obtuse, but I think it's really what I think personally is really important is for people who are entering DPC to understand DPC's history. And obviously there's like my own interpretation of DPC's history, and I can give a quick run through in a minute, but the Alliance, in my very strong opinion, and obviously I'm president of the Alliance, I'm one of the founding members of the Alliance. The Alliance was born out of a need identified by a bunch of DPC physicians that just hung out at conferences and drank and got to know each other. And it literally was a girls and boys club, so to speak. There was a small gaggle of us who were providing a lot of the speaking 4 or 5 years ago and doing a lot of answering questions on social media and starting the Facebook pages like DPC Docs, like DPC Women. There was a core group of us who in interacting online and then interacting in person at these conferences started to become friends and connections and would recommend each other. Oh, hey, I know Shane Purcell in South Carolina. You should get him involved here or whatever. And so we evolved a friendship, but really the root of that for a lot of us was just the shared purpose of growing DPC. And so from that, we started to simultaneously, there started to be more and more sort of tentacles in the DPC space of non-physicians. And not 4 or 5 years ago, there weren't a lot of people interested in DPC for their own personal gain. It was largely physicians trying to educate physicians, trying to figure things out, pushing the AAFP or FMEC or some of the broader organizations to give us a platform. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, the big players was FMEC, which you mentioned, in conjunction with the AAFP, which we've talked about, Doctors for Patient Care Foundation, which is an organization out of Florida, largely, I believe, founded by the president is Dr. Lee Gross, who is a DPC doctor. And each organization, and then HINT came on the scene, and each organization had their own reasons for supporting DPC, advocating for DPC, and each organization had their own messaging, if that makes sense. The AAFP, FMEC, Doctors for Patient Care Foundation, which kind of ultimately is also DPC Action, and HINT, all of us are pushing the same rock up a hill, but maybe in different ways and maybe for different reasons. And so what has happened, though, in the last couple of years is the messaging or the understanding of what each organization stands for or what each organization's purpose has been less clear. And so 2019, I know a number of people went to Doctors for Patient Care and they were marketing that they are the premier direct primary care organization. And some people expressed that they were quite astounded at the political undertones at that conference. The politics that were discussed or that came through there were completely appropriate if you understand what Doctors for Patient Care has been, and their goals and what they do and where they get their funding. But that messaging is lost as people are fighting to say, we are the premier voice in DPC. So FMEC represents Family Medicine Education Consortium, represents family physicians in a geographic region in the Northeast, largely, North and Middle Eastern states. The AAFP represents all family physicians who are their members, of which DPC physicians are a very small part, maybe 3%. Doctors for Patient Care Foundation is a free market medicine organization that largely supports DPC, is influenced by, and a number of DPC docs have provided content for them, but their primary overarching mission is larger than just DPC. And there are political issues involved in that organization, which is fine. And then HINT has a product to sell, and HINT has always been super DPC supportive, but HINT is more the Let's look at tech transformation of healthcare across the board. Let's hear about healthcare transformation. So what the Alliance came from was a whole bunch of DPC doctors who were providing content for all of these places and all of these conferences, recognizing like, which one is the organization that actually is doctor founded, doctor driven, and represents doctors? And there isn't one. So there's tons of overlap. And then you've got the Direct Primary Care Coalition that is a lobbying and advocacy group. And that is its job. That is how it was founded. It was physicians out of Washington State that early in DPC, our Q Alliance physicians led by Garrison and Erica Bliss, doctors Garrison and Erica Bliss, who hired a lobbyist in Washington State so that they could practice in a DPC-like model. And then they had to take that all the way in 2010 to Washington, D.C. because the ACA was being implemented. And they tucked into the ACA some provisions to allow for physicians to charge a monthly fee to patients. So like that's the history of the landscape, but nowhere in that landscape is a all physician group that advocates for physicians who want to do this. And so the real challenge actually has become that there's now more and more people across industry becoming super excited about this movement. And it opens up a very readily possibility for physicians again, to be taken advantage of. And the landscape is becoming cloudy, particularly because of the Direct Primary Care page on Facebook, which is completely unedited, completely unfettered. It's all comers. And there's people not really showing their true colors there in terms of what their motivations or their expertise is. So while I am biased as president of the Alliance, I'm going to just say something very blunt, which is for physicians particularly, there is no safer, no more authentic, and no more unbiased, and I'll qualify that, organization out there to reach out to for your own development, growth, or education. So my strong advocacy would be that if you're a physician who is curious about DPC or wants to do DPC, Google, get all the information you can, but do not spend $1 until you've reached out to the Alliance and learned what we're about and looked at all the resources we have for free already. Because truthfully, while I would love everyone to join the Alliance and strongly encourage people to do so, and it is $500 a year to be a member of the Alliance, a vast majority of our educational content is free. Our masterminds were this year were $300 for 48 hours on site at 2 to 5 clinics, just picking the brains of 2 to 10 DPC physicians in active practice. It's like tens of thousands of dollars of just free knowledge. Our vested interest and our entire membership are physicians who are doing DPC. So we try to stay out of lobbying. But we will issue statements occasionally on major political issues and say, here's where the Alliance, here's where our head is. And that comes after much effort. We've been trying very hard to grow out of our people who drink together reputation. And we're getting more of a national footprint. We're getting more diversity of thought among our organization and leadership. But our goal and the purpose of this organization is to advocate, mentor, and educate physicians about DPC, period. And I'm just going to be blunt, the page on Facebook, DPC Docs, the one that is DPC Docs is a bit hidden and private and physician only. Yeah. And if you Google direct primary care physicians in the US and took the top 10 names that just came up, the people who we might argue have been more influential in this movement, virtually none of those physicians are on that Facebook forum anymore. And I respect the people who moderate that page, but I actually went toe to toe with 2 of the moderators of DPC Docs because I was marketing the masterminds. And they said, you can't list this here. And I said, I make no money off this. This is not about me. This is about the DPC movement. And let me remind you that one of the people to provide the vast majority of founding content on this Facebook page was me and the people who are sponsoring this. So what is this? And it's a landing page for people to be DPC curious, but that is also not declared. So anyway, my number one advice, if anyone's made it this far, do not spend $1 until you have Googled everything you possibly can about DPC. And then if you want to spend money, first reach out to the DPC Alliance and ask questions, because our goal is just transparency and guidance. And we are DPC physicians only. And I get made fun of for this, but I said this on stage. Yeah. And some people think I'm a little too heavy-handed. And again, authenticity, anything but authenticity is often a waste of all of our times. So about 2.5 or 3 years ago, there was about 1,200 people on DPC Docs, and the content got to a nadir where it was really productive. And then what started happening is people started to use it to post medical cases or questions. And a physician who's actually now a very capable DPC physician, who's actually killing it, posted, what kind of mop do you guys use? And do you mop your own floor? And I lost it. Not lost it, but I basically responded and said, this is ridiculous. You are using the eyeballs of 1,200 physicians to ask about a mop. If you're an entrepreneur and you own your own business, man or woman up, make decisions, and don't use this forum for this, because what's going to happen is all the people who have something really productive to provide are going to leave. And I actually had 2 people behind the scenes say I was a disgrace to the DPC movement. How dare I say that? That who was I to say those kinds of things? And then I reached out to the moderator of that page and said, what is really the purpose of this page? Is it education? Are we going to hold people accountable to constructive criticism? And are we going to hold people accountable to thoughtful questions? And she said, basically, you are off base, meaning I'm off base. This is for the DPC curious. All questions are safe here. And so when people reached out behind the scenes to me and were really rude, and there was only 2 or 3 people, but it was enough for me to say, you know what? And I said respectfully, I said, I would like you to take down all content I've provided here for free. And I need to step back. And actually, that was one of the origins for deciding to just publish an independent document or a book. But it's gotten a little bit better too. But you also see people ask the same questions over and over and over again. And it's exhausting. And so the way that site has been moderated has tailored it for people who are just in the introductory phases of DPC. Then what happens is the rest of us just get tired and leave. Why is Garrison not on there? And I know he's retired, and I love Garrison, and he's fantastic, and he has so much to contribute. But because it's exhausting to stand up for something and to be a leader in the movement, but to have moved to a place in the movement where people don't even understand what your contribution has been so far, and then to have a moderator not stand up for you. But, and again, I don't mean this as a cut on the moderators for that site, although it is, I kind of am, but like, we haven't figured out how to scale Facebook as a learning tool. It's just really hard to do. So it's a great entry point. But it's hidden. So direct primary care becomes an entry point for almost everybody. And that is completely unmoderated. And that is where I worry physicians are being taken advantage of. So it's buyer beware. People need to do their own research in the beginning. And I would say if you go to HINT or the AAFP or FMEC or Doctors for Patient Care, all of those are robust and reliable resources. And you can poke around and see if the undertones fit your personal politics or belief structure. And then I would go after one of those organizations, or just start with the Alliance. And because our attempt is to try to thread the needle and advocate for all of those spaces. But at the core of our mission is the DPC physician, period. We want people to find the place where they go, oh, I'm safe here. I'm not going to get ripped off. I can self-advocate. I can navigate, and I can hear truth. That's what we are all about. And so, and we did little member moments and things, but your podcast stands to be much more robust. The other thing I would say, we're not super open about this. We don't try to hide it, but there is a hardship discount. And I think the DPC Alliance membership has incredible value. It has incredible value in your first year with the discounts. Like, you're going to save way more than your membership fee in discounts with the vendors you're going to use to start your practice. So I would encourage you. And then people can pay monthly. It's $48 a month. But in the first year, if there's a hardship discount, that's quite substantial.
I would totally be willing to do that, to join the Alliance. It's just that, like, I felt, again, this imposter syndrome, because I'm like, I don't even have my doors open yet. And I've been like saying I'm going to open.
Has to work on, actually. That's a really good point. Number one, everybody feels that way, and you're going to feel that way forever. And you just, I think, and totally putting everything together in a way, and I don't mean this unkindly to our male colleagues, but I think women struggle with that more across the board. And one key to entrepreneurial success is you just fake it till you make it. You don't lie, but I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. Excuse my language. That's all BS. You don't harm people. You don't do these egregious, I don't do knee replacements, but you just put it together and you move forward, and then you learn. We're working with a kind of a cool company called DearDoc. And so we just launched a bot on our website. And I know my big barrier, I'm a very chaotic, messy, wonderful, creative, my brain's full of mini ideas, tornado. And I tend to surround myself with very orderly people. And I joke, there's no FEMA if there's no natural disaster. But DearDoc needed all these deliverables from me. The clock was ticking, and I'd already paid them. And I was like, look, I need you to embed this in my website, and we need to just start. So we started, and then yesterday, we're 1 month in, and some things are going really well, but there's some really unplanned things happening, like patients using this bot to ask medical questions, right? So it's, oh crap. But literally yesterday, I now understand exactly how the bot needs to function. I understand the questions we need it to have and how we need it to triage. The only reason I know how to do that now is because I launched it and saw what happened. Other people plan and organize and then do it. But so one awesome gift of entrepreneurship is, and same thing with parenting, is you get to become comfortable doing the best you can and flying by the seat of your pants. But when you're your own boss, you can change your mind every day. It's not ideal, but you can. And so I tell people all the time, don't get in too deep financially, especially in the beginning. Don't take unnecessary risks if you don't have to, but don't be afraid to pivot the next day. You might launch on your website that you're going to charge $50 a month. And then within a week, you're like, that is the wrong number. In the beginning, you just pivot, you just fix it. And it's beautiful because that's not something we get to do when we're employed. With the Alliance and specific to you and to all your listeners, look, we want every single DPC interested, DPC motivated, and DPC startup physician to be our member. That's what we want. We need their voice. We need their questions. We need their passion. And we do not want money to be a barrier. And as a physician, I remember, and I still am, very embarrassed when I have to say $500 is a lot of money. But it is. And that's a testament to what we're doing. So email our membership committee, say, I want to join. I'm in. I want to contribute. And here's my financial situation. And we have accommodations, especially in the first year. When you have your own quote login, we have over 47 vendors with discounts. The discount for Rubicon alone is more than the annual membership. So like it's a no-brainer. Wow. And the weird thing is, like you say, you feel like an imposter. You're not open yet, so you're hesitant to join. But honestly, some of the greatest financial benefit is in the startup. And then honestly, a lot of organizations pull their speaker panel from Alliance members now. So there's an infinite number of opportunities to have your voice heard, have your influence heard. We want to give platforms to things like this, to earnest things done by earnest physicians. So it sounds cheesy, but I'm like, we want this to be the doctor club, DPC Doctor Club. And we want everybody to feel, everyone who's passionate and pushing a rock up a hill, we want them to feel like that's their administrative home. And we need that. The movement needs it because we want to be the premier voice of DPC. And the only way we can do that is if we have all the voices.
Actually, a quick update. The DPC Alliance continues to be super focused on actually maximizing your member benefit with education and mentorship and advocacy and discounts. Everybody loves discounts. So we continue to have the discounts that I mentioned, a few extra. One resource, though, there is a resource people should be aware of called Jason Health, JASON health.com. Patients can log in, order their own labs, print out an order, and take it to Quest. And it allows cash labs. So for DPC doctors that maybe are still working on their cash arrangements with labs, there's one additional opportunity. The GPO, we have a Henry Schein GPO for our members. It's not as aspirational. It's not all the way done. It's not this amazing, beautiful, you click and you whisper to it and it sends your clinic all the things you need to start up, but we're working on that. And then the third deliverable we were working on is still one of probably our biggest lifts as an organization, which is the MedMal. And Joe Grundy, our executive director, is passionately committed to making that happen. And so you probably actually will see something from him or from Dr. Neil Douglas asking for declaration sheets, because we kind of end up in a loop. They want deck sheets, we want discounts, and around we go. So still pushing that rock uphill. But all of this is to say that the better value the Alliance can provide for you, or the better value any organization can provide for you, the better opportunity we have to really stretch our patient's dollar and demonstrate how much healthcare you can get for how little, right? And so in addition to all of these discounts and opportunities for your business, and it's just a reminder that you have value, you have worth. And while we're trying to save money on one end, to still make sure we're valuing what we do properly. Because at the end of the day, all of this is about, providing healthcare with transparency and authenticity and with integrity.
What you just mentioned, malpractice is huge, just because we all expect rates to be fluctuating and going up over time.
So a great business tip as you evolve your business is build safety net upon safety net. And what I mean by that is, number one, you don't have to have lab cash pricing available for your patients. It's a nice plus, but just high quality medical care and with your cell phone or ready access to you. And it doesn't even have to be instant access. Same day access to you is an incredible win. Yeah. But my plan is always, okay, I work with X lab. I have Y lab. I have another local lab. I have all their pricing, and I have them on the runway if my lab can't keep their stuff together. And then after that, I've got Quest and I've got LabCorp that I haven't negotiated with. And then after that, I know I can get a Piccola. So it doesn't matter what my vendors do. I know I can maintain this value proposition to my patients. And the other thing I've learned over time, I fought and fought. We use a CBC. I had negotiated. No, $3.15. No, $2.85. If patients are paying $500 for a lipid panel and you can get them for $50, that's amazing. Now, and I know, and our integrity knows someone else is getting it for $5. It's all a win. And you can negotiate these things over time. You just keep working on it.
Recently, I posted a POCUS class fellowship. It's a year-long fellowship. And one of the Alliance members, he came across as like, you're not part of the Alliance, so I'm not going to share that information with you, versus every other DPC Alliance doctor I've ever talked to was like, oh, I'm part of the Alliance, and let's hear your story. I want to talk to you. They're so open. That was a very negative perceived interaction, but nobody needs to speak poorly or to represent a member as a us versus that. Like when you talk about the drinking game stuff, I mean, that's like friendly and jovial, but like when people are seriously like, you're not part of the Alliance, I'm not going to talk to you.
So one of the reasons I say that I encourage what is going to make the Alliance stronger and what is going to make the DPC movement stronger is having a physician-led organization with hopefully no disincentives that represents as much diversity of voice in this country as we possibly can. Because one challenge we have as an organization is, and I think we all have this, but is insularity, which is we have gotten past this, but we want to continue to get through it. I don't know you. Who are you? You're not a member. You're not my friend. The thing we have is we have incredibly gifted, incredibly intelligent members and some member leaders whose entire life experience has been within their own community. And that what brings them incredible strength as physician representatives of their community, but it can be very limiting in terms of sort of their global experience with just others. So I trained in rural Indiana, and so I grew up in Idaho. I went to Harvard. I worked in tech. Then I decided to be a doctor, went to med school, did my med school requirements at Vanderbilt as a post-bac. Went to University of Washington. So I've got Idaho, Massachusetts, Texas, Nashville, Washington State. And then my 4 years of med school were spread over Washington and Idaho, largely, honestly, commuting, so to speak. And then I did residency in rural Indiana because we wanted to be close to my in-laws who live in rural Ohio. And what was very difficult for me in residency, and it took me a long time to realize, I didn't know I had a culture, that Idaho has a culture. I knew I didn't fit in on the East Coast. I did great in Texas. And it wasn't about being a white girl. It was about being an Idaho girl. And I get told time and time again, nobody ever wonders what you're thinking. And that's when I feel like I'm being filtered. So at home, when I speak my mind, I'm not seen in Idaho. When I speak up, I'm not usually seen as blunt or overly direct or overly assertive. But in other communities, I will realize that my style or the style that works for me here is actually quite abrupt for some people. So what was crazy in my residency training was it took me almost my entire residency to realize that there was a pretty strong conflict between my personal culture and the fact that I expected people with an MD to have a very diverse education. And the majority of people I trained with were born in Indiana, went to high school in Indiana, went to college in Indiana, went to IU med school, and then did an IU residency with the goal of going back and serving their hometown community, which is really great. But it created this incredible disconnect between my expectations and how I was raised and what I thought it meant to be a highly educated person and what their life experience was. So I see that a little bit in the Alliance sometimes too, is we have members who have a very diverse life experience, and we have members who known they wanted to be doctors in their hometown since they were 5, and that's the goal they achieved. And when you run a national organization trying to transform our healthcare system, you see that come out. And my hope and my goal sometimes as president and my role involved in our social media forums is frankly sometimes to edit when those things come forward, because those are not in the best interest of our broad organization. And this is a business challenge, right? Once you're entrenched in your business or your life or your mothering or your fathering or your marriage, like what you need to grow and be successful is the people you want to be involved in your life to be willing to give you open feedback about where you need to go. And so just like we talk about the scalability of DPC or the scalability of an individual clinic, like the fun but also challenging thing, and this is a point in some of the entrepreneurial literature I've read, is it says, like, how often do you check in with your customers? How often do you check in with your marital partner? How often do you check in with your membership and say, what are the perceptions of what we're doing and where we're headed and where we're going and what are your needs? And in my opinion, there is zero reason why a MD or DO who wants to start their own DPC practice should not be all over the Alliance, like zero reasons. But clearly there's incredible opportunity. Same thing. I feel the same way with DPC. Like, it's a slam dunk. The majority of my patients say they save at least $2,000 a year on their medical expenses. And how does my entire community, how are they not sitting in my parking lot breaking down my door? It's a slam dunk. You know what I mean? But no amount of money, or maybe there is, that we could spend on marketing to get that message through the way it comes through when, like, you get to interact with Kissy and go, man, I respect this woman. She's on point. She's earnest. This makes sense to me.
Now, Julie, you just mentioned the fun in DPC, and so I want to highlight the aesthetics branch of SparkMD. So could you please tell us more as to how this got started and how it's grown over time?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. You know, one of the coolest things about entrepreneurship and owning your own business is you can make it what you want it to be. And one thing I think about a lot is the pathway for physicians is really pretty static and has been kind of forever, right? The idea is you sometime identify you want to be a doctor, you go to high school, get good grades, go to college, med school, residency, you come out, and then what? Like, for the next 50 years, you do the same thing. And so it shouldn't be an epiphany, but it was for me to realize many of the things that called me to family medicine and make me a really great family doctor. Specifically, you know, people say being a polymath or a Renaissance woman or Renaissance man. Apparently that's a rare and somewhat socially valuable thing, but it's also in the business world, they'll tell you true polymaths are not super common. So a polymath is someone with like multiple interests, right? And I would say the same thing that makes someone a capable polymath probably makes them a highly capable family physician. All the things we do to do it well. So with that said, it was a bit of an epiphany to realize that as I got better and better at certain aspects of our career, the curiosity continued to grow and I continued to have a drive for new things. I had been challenged for a few years by physicians who do aesthetics, specifically injectables, that with my, owning my own cash-based business, loving to use my hands, loving art and doing a ton of procedures, it was just completely obvious that a component that I could readily add to the business was aesthetics. My real transition was just, I got to a point in the business model where I realized that scalability was a challenge. And to that end, you know, I got at a crossroads, and some of it has to do with, I have pretty high payroll expenses because I have a pretty robust team. I have a bigger team than most DPC clinics would have. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of those reasons is related to my own health events during my DPC journey. And realizing, you know, cognitive, emotional, and physical bandwidth really changed after I had breast cancer. Another one is related to my leadership roles and the mentorship and a lot of the things I was doing prior to becoming DPCA president. Those things really do use a lot of time, and I was more than happy to do them. But long story short, I really thought, gosh, there's, you know, got to be an easier way to earn $1 that is exciting and enjoyable, and I feel good about. And so I went and did some Botox training. And what I really love about aesthetics is, number one, I get to use my hands. Number two, it's often instant gratification. Number three, actually, we spend a lot of time as primary care physicians, especially I think female and or the super compassionate type of primary care physician. We have a lot of interactions that kind of go like this. Hi, I'm here. I have this thing. It's burdensome to me and I don't feel good. And then the doctor says something like, tell me more about the thing. And I learn all about the thing. And then we say something like, tell me what you do in your day-to-day life to take care of yourself so you're not so burdened by the thing. And the answer is, well, I'm not going to do anything to take care of myself, and I'm not going to take medicine. And really, I'm not going to do anything, but for the next 8 years of our relationship together, I'm going to bring up the thing that makes my life so awful and not do anything about the thing. And that's human nature, and that's what we do. What I love about aesthetics is it often has a different dynamic, which is this. Hi, doctor, I have this thing. And I say, oh, and what do you think about the thing? I don't like the thing. What can we do about the thing? And I say, we could see about the thing. Can we do that now? And then they leave. And on the end of the opportunity to pivot something for someone. And anyway, another pivot point for me was changing how I viewed aesthetics and changing really how I viewed how people choose to spend their money. Because there's a lot of hard truths in how people don't value their healthcare provider. And we see a lot of those truths reflected in how we are paid or how people decide to pay us. And yes, the same person that will spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on minor augmentation of their appearance will not invest that same amount in a full year of primary care with a highly capable doctor. And that's not about you and that's not about me. That's the world we live in. And you can fight it or you can look at it and say, this is something that looks fun and enjoyable and I'm more than qualified to do. And people are willing to pay for it. And I'm going to work hard and do it well. And so that's the very long-winded answer, but that's kind of how aesthetics, esoterically, how aesthetics entered my life and the role it plays.
Wonderful. And just a few months ago, you taught an aesthetics course at SparkMD. So I wanted to ask, what was that like, and will you do more in the future?
Yeah. So I appreciate you asking about that. So one thing I always try to really be mindful of is conflict of interest. And I, just being blunt, don't want to use my influence that I have earned in the DPC space, inappropriately or erroneously. So I've kind of been a little hush hush or kept under the radar, but I really have struggled to find a high quality, intensive 2 or 3 day aesthetics class for physicians by physicians. And so that was my goal, was to offer an intensive sort of, get you off the runway and off the ground and get things started in a setting that starts from a platform of this is a highly capable person who understands anatomy and injections and needles and already has a pretty robust skill set that just needs translated a little bit and into a slightly different space. So we had 12 DPC, mostly DPC. We had 12 physicians who flew in from all around the country, and it was awesome. And the feedback was we need to make it longer and do more and even throw in some business education. So my intention is to do another class this fall. It's at SparkMD Aesthetics Training, and people are welcome to email me about that or anything else. My tenure as president of the Direct Primary Care Alliance ends at the end of this year. And my intention is to pivot and use some more of my time on aesthetics education for physicians and some business education for physicians and work in that space and continue to support the Alliance, obviously. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Definitely. And now in closing, you've talked about the movement and also this idea of the gift of entrepreneurship and feeling comfortable doing the best you can by flying by the seat of your pants. So I want to ask, do you have any thoughts or tips on how a person who is in the entrepreneur space, is in the DPC space, can reevaluate their own value going into the future, whether that person is thinking about entrepreneurship or whether that person is already established as an entrepreneur?
Your questions are so good. You make me think. I think the overarching touchy-feely answer is that, and I've said something to this effect before, but if you're a physician, you have worked extremely, extremely hard to have the right to do this work, or to have the privilege to do this work, or to have the license to do this work, whatever you want to call it. If you're a physician who could practice medicine or who is practicing medicine, do not forget how hard one that is. And I know we feel the burden of it and the PTSD of it and the fatigue of it and the burnout of it. But I like to flip it upside down and say, this is a privilege you've earned and you can do so many things with it. So particularly when a physician is employed, I think, especially early in their career physician, I think you have no concept for what you can do with your abilities or your license or what you have earned, but you can really make your own world. And there's a couple barriers that really have to be overcome. And the first is your own limitations, that what you have trained to do can only be done in one way or one setting. The second is that you'll be judged or you won't be pure or it won't be true if you do it a certain way. And the third is that you can't change your mind or pivot. And I think we're seeing more and more communication on Facebook pages like, the entrepreneurial physician Facebook pages. And we're seeing more and more narrative of physicians really reclaiming their energy and their capability and pivoting and transitioning in their career either into or out of clinical medicine. But if when you're in the room with the patient, you mostly really love it, then I think you should dig deep and really look into DPC. And a lot of doctors will say, oh, I'm not a great business person, but that comes and you'll learn. And there's a gazillion of us out here who can help and mentor and share our story, which is what everyone's doing here. And all these stories have so much meaning and so much value, and both in hearing your own struggles in them, but also gathering pearls for creating the life that you enjoy.
Wonderful and so inspiring. And I want to ask there, what is the best way for others to reach out to you after this podcast?
Thank you. Yes, I'm most responsive to email. So my email is Dr. Gunther. So it's drg@sparkmd.com.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gunther, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Marielle. Thank you so much. You're amazing. I'm excited for you. Your clinic is going to be beautiful. People are lucky to have you as their doc, man.
That means the world to me.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Omar Akhtar of Medina Medicine in Austin, Texas. And remember, there is a whole lineup of DPC Alliance masterminds coming. Dr. Jack Forbush and Dr. Claude Ryan just shared about the events they're hosting on the podcast earlier this week. Check out their episode in the pod feed. If you'd like to know more about the masterminds that are happening coast to coast, check out dpcalliance.org for registration and for more details. DPC Alliance members get $100 off registration fees, and for non-members, use the code MyDPCStory, that's MYDPCSTORY, one word, no spaces, for $50 off registration. Also, there is still time to help out fellow DPCer Dr. Christina Dahl get more finalist votes and hopefully win the annual Amber Grant. That's a $25,000 award towards her DPC and her community. Please visit ambergrantsforwomen.com and then find her on the list of past recipients. A win for Dr. Dahl is a win for DPC. If you like what you heard today, please leave a review and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Tell your friends too. For more information on this episode and much more, including DPC swag, please visit mydpcstory.com. Also, for the latest in DPC news, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.